Hello, everybody. A few days ago, I was approached by a research team in Spain called La Quinta Columna, means fifth column in English. And you may remember they became well known when they identified that there was graphene in the fake COVID vaccines. And this is highly significant for many, many reasons, not least the one I'm going to talk about here briefly before we see a recording I made with the team this week. Now, the reason they wanted to contact me is because they said they'd confirmed from their research that what I've been saying about COVID and the jab since the spring of 2020 has been confirmed by their research, but also intriguingly, especially for me, is they said that they were also confirming what I was saying about the human society manipulation by a non-human force that's in the hidden. We can't see it. We can't hardly see anything if you take into account what's called visible light and the visual frequency band that we can see. But it's so tiny, it's laughable. So almost everything that exists is outside of human sight. So before I get into that and we see the recording, some background of what I've been saying since April 2020. And that is that, first of all, there never has been a COVID virus. It doesn't exist. It's a complete hoax on that scale. And most of the alternative media still thinks that there is, but there never has been. What I said was that the fake virus, the illusion of it, and I explain at length how the illusion was played, was an excuse simply for the mass vaccination of the human population. And what I've been saying about the jab and its content ever since is that the self-replicating nanotechnology, which has been identified under microscopes by scientists and researchers around the world now, that self-replicating nanotechnology is designed to connect us and connect the brain to artificial intelligence and the cloud, this massive global electromagnetic field that's being generated through 5G, 6G, 7G to come. And we see the towers everywhere in urban areas, and that's one way of generating the cloud, yes, but you can't do it globally through towers. If you want to cover every inch of the planet with this electromagnetic field, this cloud, and you want to connect every human to it so we become a hive mind and individuality disappears, then you have to do it from space. And so we've got SpaceX, Elon Musk, and others, but SpaceX is the leader, putting up constantly, he's bragging about it all the time on his Twitter X, low orbit satellites to beam this cloud ultimately at every inch of the planet. And what I've been saying is that this connection between the nanotechnology in the jab that is self-replicating in the body is the connection to the cloud. And what the La Quinta Columna research team are saying is that graphene is a superconductor that amplifies the power of the cloud, the electromagnetic field, inside the body and therefore amplifies the connection between the body and the brain and the cloud. And they say, you'll see in the recording I'm going to show shortly, that they're saying that if you look at the effect of graphene in the body, in the brain, then it explains all the blood clots. It explains the heart failure and the heart disease that we've seen. Not least, they explain why it so affects young sports people, why it's generating really aggressive cancers, and why so many have reported around the world that friends and associates who've had the fake vaccine go through a personality change. Because what the research team is saying is this graphene gets into the brain and then rewires the way it processes information, not least in the connection to the cloud. So you would expect personality changes on that basis. So when you look at disease X, it's bloody everywhere, isn't it? Coming out of the World Economic Forum and Gates and Schwab, and it's all over the internet. Oh, disease X. And, you know, those, even in the alternative media, who've bought the idea that there is a virus, are looking at that, again, a pathogen or a bioweapon to manifest eventually as what's being called disease X. It's always X. But actually what the La Quinta Columna team are saying is, because of this graphene connection to the cloud, it means that all they've got to do is tweak the communications from the cloud to the body, and they can manifest symptoms and health effects that they can then dub whatever they call disease X when they get round to it. And looking at this other area that the team wanted me to talk with them about, and that is the non-human manipulation of humanity. What they found, they say, is that the effect on the body, brain of the content of the jabs is the same as that which is found in people who have claimed to be abducted by extraterrestrials. I know, reptilians, greys, whatever. And so they're looking at what I've been warning about all these years, in this case going back decades, that the plan is to create a human hive mind where, instead of thinking individually, we get our thoughts and our emotional responses direct from the cloud to which everyone is attached. And so I was intrigued when we recorded a chat this week to see that they were explaining the methodology of how that hive mind is now possible. Now, the founder and director of La Quinta Columna is Ricardo Delgado Martin. And you'll be hearing from him shortly as he makes his presentation of the findings. But here's some background from his CV. Ricardo has a degree in biostatistics from the University of Seville. He has a master in biostatistics, postgraduate in health biology, clinical microbiology, epidemiology, and clinical immunology. He says he's an expert, a university expert in clinical genetics, has a certificate of scientific contribution from the University of Seville, and is a postgraduate master in child psychology, master in banking and finance too, he says, from the Higher Institute of Banking Techniques and Practices. And on top of all that, and all the other experience he's had in these fields, he's got an open mind. Oh dear. What a bonus. A mind that is not enslaved by preconceived idea, but lets the information be its guide. So here's Ricardo. He'll be speaking first, and then I'll respond. And make of it what you will, but it's fascinating. Here we go.
I'd like to thank all those of you who are present today. I'm going to be in charge of the script for this meeting, and you may intervene at any moment in time during the meeting. First of all, I'd like to thank all those of you who are here today for making this meeting possible. And in particular, thank you to Mr. Eich for granting this time to us. Above all, I'd like to offer my heartfelt condolences for the death of your daughter. Allow me, Mr. Eich and Astrid, to give a very brief summary of our research, together with Dr. Sevillano and other independent scientists who make up La Quinta Columna. In general terms, we started our research with empirical evidence, proof, and we've reached conclusions that are very much in line with what you, Mr. Eich, have been saying for a long time now. The most important evidence we have come up with is that the COVID disease is acute radiation syndrome enhanced by a material that is graphene. Firstly, in the anti-flu vaccines used for old people's homes, and we found graphene oxide in the injectables using micro-Raman technique. So I'm going to give a presentation. Astrid, I'm going to share the screen. This is the slide that says we have proof that the COVID disease is acute radiation syndrome. Initially in the flu vaccines. This is Dr. Pablo Campra Madrid, a professor at university and with a degree in chemical or doctor in chemical sciences and a degree in biological sciences. The conclusions of his work is that objects which the Raman patterns are unmistakably that of reduced graphene oxide. And here we have the signals of graphene oxide. I will leave this slide for later. But something important is that based on the properties of graphene and also its toxicity, both what they call COVID-19 as well as the excess death rate can be explained by this. In fact, this is in English, and you can see that graphene oxide is detected in the body by specialized cells of the immune system, and its behavior is similar to that of a pathogen. This is in Spanish, but you will be able to see that it generates an inflammatory response. There is mitochondrial damage, damage to the DNA, and a cytokine response. And from the point of view of intravenous administration, it is mainly eliminated via the lungs, causing pulmonary inflammation, and this is the origin of pneumonia. When graphene becomes in touch with the blood, it generates a biomolecular corona. Graphene at a nanoscale is what they have called SARS-CoV-2 or coronavirus. Graphene is a radiomodulable material. And this means that it becomes excited by electromagnetic fields. And the toxicity that emanates from it depends on the amount of radiation that it can absorb. Let's have a look at this on a slide now. We have it here. One of the effects is the thrombocyticity, which coagulates the blood. And this causes all the damages such as strokes, ischemias, heart attacks, things that we're seeing nowadays. Now, in order to generate artificial outbreaks that they call waves, all they have to do is excite or increase the quality of the frequencies that are emitted via telephony masts or towers. Here we can see that graphene acts as an amplifier, converting the gigahertz into terahertz, i.e. thousands of times more within the body. More specifically, there is a particular danger now, and that is that graphene that is present in the injectables is particularly affected by 26 gigahertz. And as you will well know, in our country, as well as in other parts of Europe and the world, 26 gigahertz is the next frequency to be emitted. It's already been put out to tender in all these countries. And this will lead to the next pandemic that they're already cooking up to some extent. But in the vaccines, there isn't only graphene present. There are a series of micro and nanostructures which make up a intracorporeal nanotechnology with different objectives. All this is visible under optical microscopy. For example, if you like, well, we've done more than 700 observations, and we even have a Pfizer vial, and we have the microscope that is connected, so that you can see exactly what there is there. I'm going to move this a little bit. This is the self-assembled technology after 1 week of exposure to radiation. Quite clearly, these are artificial patterns. Something important too is that the COVID vaccines do not contain messenger RNA, and neither do they even contain biological material. The governments themselves have brought in a false dissidence in order for them to talk about the RNAs and the spike protein, in order to cover up this intracorporeal nanotechnology. We're just giving you a very brief summary. We could go into a lot more detail, of course. But now we come to a very important point. Why graphene or its derivative, graphene oxide? Well, graphene is an interface. It's a neural interface. It's magnetic within the body, and therefore we can read and write information. And this means that one can monitor, modulate, and stimulate remotely and wirelessly by means of telephony masts or towers. But in addition, we can monitor or stimulate a heartbeat. What I mean is that they can kill an individual remotely or groups of people remotely. Graphene oxide has affinity for electrical systems, the central nervous system, neurons, and also the cardiac system. And this is precisely where we're seeing most of the damage taking place. This covers the neurotechnologies and the capacity to insert thoughts, to insert feelings, and neuronal supervision of the whole of the world's population. In short, it is a neural implant by means of a liquid interface, the vaccines. And in addition, it is intranasal even, in order to translocate it straight to the neurons, which is this here. This is what they're now putting into children. Now we come to another very important point, because until now, everything had been scientific. But when La Quinta Columna received the study from Dr. Roger Leir, he was a surgeon who extracted implants from people who had said they had been abducted. We have seen that the technology that was present in those implants is exactly the same technology that is contained in the injectables. Let's have a look at the video of Dr. Roger Leir.
President Obama, at the time, he was trying to raise money for the medical care bill. With the material science associated with these objects that we have found here, with this is a very advanced nanotechnology. These are nanotechnological devices. in which nanocarbon tubes, either single or double wall, I won't go into the whole explanation, but they can be elongated and weaved into carbon nanofibers, carbon nanostrands, and they end in crystalline structures, which are what we call orthorhombic, which are regular rectangular structures. So here's a very, very advanced when I say nanotechnological, I'm talking about things that are on a level of the size of an atom, using the principal elements of certain materials, putting them together in such a way so that you're actually broadcasting or switching what we perceive as a radio wave, which may not be a radio wave. It could be scalar technology.
Scalar technology is this new technological implementation, 5G. And it's doing exactly the same. They're doing exactly the same. Scalar technology is 5G. And the immediate conclusion, Mr. Ike, is that we are before a mass planetary implant of the whole of the human species. Those nanotubes that Dr. Lear was talking about, those crystal orthorhombic structures, are present in the Pfizer vial. We're seeing this with not a great deal of magnification. The carbon nanotube is graphene in the form of a tube. This is now with a little more magnification. We have hundreds of videos. And the orthorhombic crystal structures that Dr. Roger Lear mentioned can be seen here. According to scientific literature, these correspond to graphene plasmon antennae, nanotransceivers based on graphene, rectifier circuits, whole series of intracorporeal technologies, not only to monitor human beings, but also to modulate them. And from the cardiac point of view and neural point of view. When we reviewed archaeology, we saw through a meeting we held with Dr. Pablo Enrique Garcia, who has gathered thousands of samples from the area of Ojuelos in Mexico. And we realized that what they are doing currently, they did in the past, quite probably with other humanoids. And here we have to talk about the trepanated skulls. According to our opinion, these trepanated skulls are the introduction of solid implants within the bodies of those beings. The final objective of neuromodulation is to cause the suffering of the human farm. This is an energy that they can make use of. And we suspect that these are purely energy beings. They govern and control our world and our civilization, probably always have done so. And they hide behind deceit and lies in all areas and disciplines, including science, like a predator does so in order to hunt its prey. communication between them and the world that they allow us to see quite probably is done through Masonic lodges and secret societies. We are quite possibly, therefore, before their fourth industrial revolution. It's not a human being's fourth industrial revolution, and this will allow them to collect bioenergies on a mass and an industrial scale. We suspect, as we said, that their nature is purely energetic. And according to our research, they need two types of energy. Geoenergies, which are dense magnetic energies from the terrestrial point of view, and bioenergies, which are the energies emitted by human beings, in particular when they are suffering. And this will lead us to a change in the exploitation of the farm by means of the terraformation of the planet. Quite possibly institutions such as NASA or different military bases have been created by them or under the orders of them to cover or hide their existence. They call themselves gods or whatever, but they've always requested for human and animal sacrifices. That is, bioenergy. Their habitat units hope to be 15-minute smart cities, where the geoenergy will be replaced by artificial microwave technologies that will provide greater density to the planet, and the bioenergy will be guaranteed by the stabled population. And this is why they want you to stay at home, climatic lockdowns, lockdowns because of a social emergency, or smart cities. An optimum industrial yield of bioneuromass. And it's quite possible that they are preparing the planet to be able to occupy it and have its herd stabled to have energy at their disposal. So we have given you a very basic summary here, but quite possibly from the scientific point of view, which was the origin of our research, we have reached conclusions that are also scientific in nature, and that to a certain extent corroborate what you have been developing and arguing for a long time now. So I'll give the floor to the other participants now.
Okay. Okay. So, yeah, I would like just to add, and confirm what Ricardo and José Luis have said for a long time, and it's getting deeper and deeper, and it really correlates with what I have been observing. And I'm, I don't know, maybe you don't know me, but I'm an expert in public health, and I've worked with WHO and the United Nations extensively as an expert for the governments, making reviews of science. And I worked in the pandemic unit for emergency management, putting up the training. And we had to stop after 4 years because Bill Gates came and stopped the funding for us to work. So I've been teaching the IHR, International Health Regulation, and WHO, emergency management in the university after that. But what I want to say is that it corroborates with the fact that as soon as Ricardo Delgado, Quinta Columna, and Professor Campra put out that news, there was a doubt that what was going on was all a lie, and already before it was a total lie, because you never lock down a country in 3 weeks with a virus that mutates so much. It is a very common flu. It has no effect. So it was very clear that it was a coup d'etat in the whole world. So that's where I start. And what I notice is the correlation with the discovery of nanotech in the vaccine, with WHO producing in the emergency management, the gene editing, and I think it's a very important issue because those people are obsessed with gene editing. And I always, challenge Dr. Malone and all those people talking of mRNA, COVID, spike protein. I said, could you tell us why WHO wants to do the gene editing and why CRISPR-Cas9 got the Nobel Prize when it's ethically going to break humanity? So I'm coming from another conjunction to discuss also with what you think all is that on top of what you said, behind the scene, there is a will to keep on hybridizing, to keep on changing humanity the way they want and go into their genome and start changing the book of life, the code of life, the God code, if you want. So, and with CRISPR-Cas, they have reached a breach because you can go in the book of the gene, take off the pages, rewrite the script, and you can become an artificial or a hybrid. So that's really the first point. There is an obsession for them to get the genome data of the whole world to an extent where you think they are not human and they know how different we are, and they're going to target electromagnetically with electromagnetic auditory effect in the brains of people. Depending on their genome, they could target and scan with the drone. I've seen them in front of my house. They were scanning everybody who got the shot. Just to add one thing, has an ID code. I don't know if you're aware that David. They all have a kind of RFID, and they have they're like living antennas. You'll have to confirm, Ricardo and José Luis, more about that. So all the people in the street who got those vax, probably all already, the military got probably implants since a long time, are living antennas. And they are no more controlled by the spirit of the human genome, but by a hacking that is much deeper that they want to get. And we can keep on, but I want to just add that to that. That there is a lot of research from Jacques Benveniste and some French researcher of the fact that you can code any disease you want. Every molecule has a weight, every weight has a frequency, and you can create with a frequency a wave. You can create a disease, and I made a report for the judges of France on that you can actually induce any disease if probably the structure, like Roger Leir is saying, corresponds to the receptor is good enough. They can really even make a riot in the street and do zombies. So for me, that is very important, is to talk about where we're going with those people trying to change our codes, trying to become, so we can discuss further, but I wanted to add that it's, for me, a very important agenda.
Yeah, if I could speak.
Luis, si te parece.
Ricardo, I tell you, listening to you so far from a scientific point of view is extraordinary to me, because what you're confirming is what I've been trying to get across for, well, parts of it, much of it, for decades. And if I just quickly explain what that is for people and connect that to what you've said, it is an extraordinary correlation and confirmation. First of all, in the spring of 2020, I said two things. A, there wasn't a virus, that was a hoax. And two, that 5G can mimic the symptoms of what they're claiming is the virus. And immediately I was banned from everything that moved. And I've been writing for decades about the plan to create a human hive mind, which can be centrally controlled in terms of its perception, And my explanation of the connection between, and you have to connect the two, between the what I call the fake vaccine and the extraordinary levels now of technologically generated radiation, 4G, 5G, 6G, 7G to come, is this hive mind being played out, whereby the content of the vials creates a self-replicating system. You talk about graphene, it fits perfectly, that infiltrates the body and infiltrates the brain and creates a connection between the human body and the brain and the what people like Ray Kurzweil at Google call the cloud. In other words, this global radiation field. And the more that they expand the 5Gs and the 6Gs and the 7Gs, the more powerful this becomes. And when you talk about graphene being a superconductor that amplifies the electromagnetic frequencies within the body, then you've got this connection between human perception, emotional and mental, and this cloud. And, you know, one of the things I've been getting a lot of abuse for on the internet is pointing out that the alternative media's obsession with Elon Musk is bordering on insanity, because through SpaceX and others, but he's leading it, which, and if you look at SpaceX, it's a Pentagon operation, a NASA Pentagon operation. Low orbit satellites are going up all the time, thanks to Mr. Musk's SpaceX, which are beaming this radiation field increasingly as more and more are activated, to ultimately what they want is every inch of the planet. And if at the same time you've got the receiver system, which is the human body infiltrated by graphene, etc., then you have this very hive mind in place through which, as you pointed out, Ricardo, thoughts, perceptions can be manipulated. It's exactly what I've been saying with the plan. And then you take it to another level. And a thing that I've got so much ridicule for, I don't care because it's true, is that humanity is being manipulated from another dimension of reality. And when people don't realize what reality is and the incredibly narrow band of frequency that we can actually see, if they could understand that, then they would realize that these other dimensions of reality, which people say, well, if they exist, why can't we see them? Well, we can't see them for the same reason that a radio station on this wavelength doesn't interfere with a frequency on that wavelength. In other words, these different dimensions of reality are sharing the same space that I'm sitting in now, but they're on different wavelengths, and we are only able to access an incredibly narrow band of visual reality, what they call visible light, and everything else exists in what to us is unseen. And what I've been saying is that there are entities, ultimately energetic entities, although they do take form in various ways, but those energetic entities have been manipulating human society, and they have created on their behalf what I call the global cult. This is the network of secret societies, expressions of which in the public arena are the World Economic Forum and the Bilderberg Group and the Council on Foreign Relations and all these other deeper secret societies. And that network of secret societies, which is fiercely compartmentalized so that even most of the people within it don't realize what the game really is. That's only for the inner core. But that network is representing these non-human entities to impose their will upon the human population. So what you have, therefore, is these non-human entities being able to infiltrate humanity via the fake vaccine and the fake COVID hoax justifying the fake vaccine and all these other sources of graphene, on behalf of these non-human entities, to create a receiver system which can be controlled en masse, hive mind, by these non-human entities. And the other thing, just to finish, which you bring in as well, Ricardo, is that I'm saying that the reason, or a fundamental reason, why this manipulation goes on and why the world is as it is, with so much war, conflict on every level, suffering, deprivation, is to generate low vibrational, emotional, and mental energy in response to that: fear, anxiety, depression, resentment, hatred, whatever. Because that frequency band is what these entities absorb as an energetic sustenance. And the more that they can generate this energy from human response to events and situations, the more powerful they are able to become. And that energy is then recycled back against humanity in more and more control. And I could say a heck of a lot more, but I think that's just explaining how what I've been saying all these years is so magnificently supported by your scientific research.
Yes, we fully agree with everything that Mr. Ike has just said. And in addition, we believe that they've gone an extra step forward. They seem to be harvesting the crop in more general terms now. The wars are partial collections, but now we seem to have a full harvest in energy terms. And this, as you know, Jose Luis, graphenism means that enters into the biology to parasite or to act as a parasite. No, sorry. For humans to be predated on by these other entities. In the same way, Jose Luis, you might like to go into more details and talk about exoparasites and endoparasites. Well, what I find most interesting about all of this, Mr. Ike, is that after 3 years of research that we've been carrying out, both Ricardo and myself and the team of the La Quinta Columna, we've reached conclusions that you reached after decades. You announced the presence of these entities and beings and their global governance system. And I asked myself what you think, because your information comes from other sources which are not ours, and quite possibly you are ahead of us, and the announcement of the extinction of the human beings with this transhumanist agenda maybe is the end of our species. And so, with your knowledge of what has happened to date, what do you think awaits human beings in the next few years? Because we're at the climax of this colonization by we don't know what type of species. What is it you know about what's going to happen in the world in the next 2 to 3 years, and that we can't know because our scientific research doesn't allow us to see this, and we base ourselves on what we're seeing on the day-to-day basis. You knew all about this before we even started our research, so can you tell us what awaits us around the corner?
Well, the idea is complete and utter human control. What we've seen is a process, a sequence. Up to this point, humanity's perceptions, this is the key, control perception, you control behavior, you control human society. You control perception up to this point by manipulating information. You can go back to the period, well, it still is if we only realized it, but when it was overtly, massively the source of control, and that's religion. What religion did was build a wall or circle the wagons around a particular belief system. And anyone that went outside of that belief system, had another view of reality or whatever, was burned at the stake or at best ostracized. And this was holding humanity, and like I say, still is for vast numbers of people, in a perceptual prison cell from which they had very little scope to escape from, in the sense that when you see people like Giordano Bruno and so many others that were challenging this religious tyranny, you see what happened to them. And we had a situation where a very, very few people were controlling human society through the system of kings and queens and monarchs. But what has happened, for whatever reason, is that humanity has moved into a wider perceptual reality, in the sense that so many people now have started to question the religious stories and the religious tales we're supposed to believe in, literally, not symbolically. And science has come in. Now, you will know this, Ricardo, better than most people, I'm sure, is that what we call mainstream science is just another religion. It's another belief system. And it takes people like you who can think out of the box to break through the resistance, again, of a belief system. So they don't really care if you have a religious belief system that's rigid and unyielding, or a scientific belief system that's rigid and unyielding. As long as it's rigid and unyielding, they gotcha. And as we have seen more and more people start to question authority and the authority narratives, which is another expression of a wider perceptual state of the possible emerging, the response to this, and my goodness, did we see it during COVID, has been mass censorship. And what is censorship? It's seeking to control the information that people receive, so that the perceptions that they glean and come to from that information is manipulated. So if you're only hearing one version of something, then you're likely to believe it because everyone else seems to believe it, and that's all you hear. That's what censorship's about. But where we are moving to now is a situation where none of that is any longer necessary, where your perceptions do not have to be manipulated. They will come direct via what we call AI. Now, artificial intelligence. Well, what is it? You know, I hear people talking about AI this, AI that, but I rarely hear people say, what is it? Now, on one level, it's algorithms. On another level, it's artificial intelligence that can be expanded in its awareness by a constant input of knowledge. All the stuff that people are posting on the internet is ultimately going into AI so that AI knows more about humanity than humanity does. But there's another level of AI, what we call AI, which is actually these entities. So what we're looking at is moving through the AI sequence to the point where these entities will be controlling the human mind via the hive system we've discussed. This is where they plan to go, so that humans will not have a thought or an emotional response that isn't generated through the hive mind, and therefore you're going to have collective responses and collective mental states. And, you know, if we go to Ray Kurzweil, this so-called futurist at Google, a Google executive, he said some time ago that by 2030, he gave that year, humans will be connected to, or will be being connected to, artificial intelligence, and via the cloud. And when you look at what I've been saying all these decades and what you're saying from your own scientific research, Ricardo, he is describing exactly what we're talking about. And what he said was that once the connection to the human brain has been installed, these are his words, artificial intelligence will do more and more and more of human thinking until human thinking as we know it is negligible. And what I'm saying is that human thinking, in quotes, will be these entities thinking for us. There will be no human mind anymore. There will only be the entity's mind dictating every response. And of course, as you rightly point out, once you've got that kind of control, you can generate mental, emotional, biological states that produce the very energy that you're looking for. So that's where the plan is ultimately designed to go. And what you have, and you mentioned one of them, are excuses to justify the sequence that I'm talking about. So what was the COVID fake virus? It was simply a manufactured excuse to justify the fake COVID vaccine with all that was in those vials, is in those vials that you've exposed. What is human-caused climate change and the need for the transformation of human society as a response? It's an excuse to introduce this digital control system. And you mentioned the smart cities and the 15-minute cities and all that. Exactly right. That is being justified by human-caused climate change, which is as big a hoax as COVID ever was. And you then see that as a result, and we bring people like Elon Musk back in, he comes up everywhere. I'd like the alternative media just to note that in its naivety, with things like electric cars. Electric vehicles are not designed to replace petrol and diesel vehicles because first of all, people can't afford them. And secondly, there's not enough resources anyway for all the batteries and etc. that would be necessary. The whole introduction of the electric car, the autonomous car, where it drives you, is to get rid of car use among the mass of the people altogether. And thus you are again isolating people in these small areas of 15-minute cities, etc. And so when you look at where this is going and the excuses being used to go there, they are simply made up lies to justify this sequence I'm talking about, to the entity hive mind replacing what you might call the individual human mind, which has its own ability for unique thought, emotion, and perception. So that's where it's going.
But I have a question.
Well, we
Coincidimos
coincide
entonces
in
en
that
que la inteligencia
artificial
artificial
intelligence
sería
would
el
be
cuadro de mando
like
de ese
the
tipo de
control
entidades energéticas.
system of these energy entities.
So I didn't quite get that. Yeah,
Yes.
that's exactly what I'm saying. That we're looking at, for those that survive, and a lot won't be able to make that transition to a much more kind of synthetic human being. But those that survive will no longer have individual thought, unique spins on the world. The idea is that everyone has the same spin on the world because it's coming from a central point. And, you know, in the end, and this is why it's so important to understand these things, because, you know, when I look at what's called the alternative media, increasingly it is being corralled into the myopia of whether Trump should win the next election or someone else, the myopia of politics and left-right politics and the financial, what I call the 5 cents level of society. And that's where they want us. They don't want us to realize that, and this is why the suppression of this has been so fierce, that we too are energetic entities, ultimately. This is just a vehicle for our consciousness to experience this reality we call the human world, which is just a band of frequency. And therefore, if we only started to remember what we've been manipulated in a calculated way to forget, that we are consciousness, and we are ultimately all consciousness having a brief human experience, that we have the power to overpower these energetic entities. I mean, when you look at it, we're supposed to be 8 billion people in the world now. So that's, say, 8 billion expressions of consciousness, potentially. And the number of people in full knowledge that are manipulating the direction of that 8 billion in the way we're describing is absolutely tiny by comparison. The amount of consciousness that collectively we have in these 8 billion people is vastly, vastly greater than the power of the consciousness to impose itself coming from these energetic entities. It's not the tail wagging the dog whether it's the entities or the cult in the human world, it's not the tail wagging the dog, it's the tail wagging the elephant. And so what we have to be manipulated to believe, and religion did this, is that we're little subordinate entities to some god or other. And I'm not saying there's not a force, which I call the all that is, which some people call God. I'm not saying that. But that we're just subordinate little beings and we have to do what we're told. And that mentality is so unbelievably disempowering that we look to authority to tell us what to think. And so when people come out with COVID out of this unbelievably corrupt organization, the World Health Organization and what have you, people just do what authority tells them without question. And while we do that, we're giving the power to the few to control the many. If what the few say we do en masse, then what is that except the power of the few over the many? But if we said collectively, we're not doing that, we're not doing what you tell us, especially as we get more and more understanding of the scale of why they're telling us that and what the game really is, then we take away the power that this has over us. I mean, it's a classic that you have Elon Musk, who is fronting up, that's all he's doing. He's fronting up SpaceX with the low orbit satellites. He's fronting up Neuralink, connecting the brain to artificial intelligence. He's fronting up Tesla with the promotion of the electric autonomous vehicle. And yet, the alternative media that's supposed to be challenging all that and will tell you that it is, has turned this guy into some kind of god just because he lets people back onto Twitter. And the question then comes is, the deep state controlled Twitter. It controlled what was said on it, what was posted on it. It vehemently censored people in the COVID era, as we know. And so the deep state, is an expression of this cult, had complete control of Twitter, now X. Elon Musk takes it over and then releases these Twitter files that confirm from documentation, yes, the deep state controlled Twitter, yeah. So my question, and I don't see people asking this, is if the deep state controlled Twitter and what was posted on it, in other words, the complete control of censorship, why did they sell it to Elon Musk, who is supposed to be, he's not, a free speech absolutist? The same Elon Musk that is fronting up all these companies that are advancing this agenda we're talking about here. It's a scam. And, you know, people need to get streetwise, and they need to do this, I would suggest. Stop looking for a savior. Stop looking for a political savior or some tech savior. There's 8 billion of us. The collective consciousness of that number is absolutely fantastic in its impact on creation, if only we used it. Stop looking for a savior, look in the mirror and see where the real one is. Collectively, we can still end this, but not if we go on as we are, giving our power away constantly to the few, and then claiming that we are challenging the power of the few. It's ridiculous.
We knew that Mr. Elon Musk was a traitor to the whole species and is completely governed by them. In fact, he in 2016 did an interview, and when he was asked about his implant, Neuralink, and he recognized the fact that it can go through veins and arteries because like that it has direct access to the neurons. In La Quinta Columna, we've learned to discern, to differentiate. And if I've understood correctly, Mr. Reich, you are claiming the power of human beings above the power of information, and seeing what the situation is and knowing what is circulating on the network and that very few people pay attention to, despite censorship. Do you think that the way to deal with this end of cycle or this final attack against the free will of human beings is to stimulate the power of human beings against this attack, regardless of the information that they have, because the information is either censored or it is hidden or one is punished or may not even exist. So we can't count on information. We simply have to try to stimulate the power of human beings against an attack against the whole of the world's population. How is that done without being able to control all the information that reaches all human beings, which is the power that they have? How can we stimulate that power in humanity if we don't have the means to get that knowledge to human beings?
Well, I think there's another level of communication that is far more powerful than Facebook and Twitter and Google or any of them. And that's the field that connects everything. The five senses can see what we call matter. That's why I'm sitting in this room and I can see form, lights and walls and windows. But between the form is, to me, from my five sense perception, empty space. But it's not. It's energy. It's consciousness, energy, consciousness. And therefore, this field is what we are interacting with. If people could use the analogy of a computer interacting with Wi-Fi. And this field can either dominate us by the information, perception, frequency, etc., vibration within it impacting upon us, or we can impact on it. And the more people that awaken to this understanding, that awaken to what the game is, and I'm talking about this level of the game that we're talking about here, not where the vast majority of this, of what I call the mainstream alternative media is. It's still wondering if Trump's going to win or not. But this big picture, the more people that get this, that awareness is going in the field. It's and people are interacting with this field all the time, and therefore the more people that awaken and that perceptual state goes into the field as a vibrational state, the more other people are going to be impacted by it who are interacting with the field, i.e., everybody. And so that even on that level, we can communicate on a non-verbal level without having to control all the information. See, what the information is doing is impacting upon the field. The key is this field, what I call the simulation field, actually. This field, they have to dominate its state of perception, if you like. So if they can, and what we call censorship is actually just a means of getting to this field to control it. Because we're interacting with it all the time, we are part of it. Its state of perception, of frequency, of vibration is impacting upon us. They know that. This is the level they're working at. So when they control the media and they control Silicon Valley and the the sources of communication, what they're doing is pounding out information, which is also going into this field, and it's affecting human perception, like COVID, or there's a deadly virus, and that then goes from the individual that's conceded to that perception, also putting that into the field. So suddenly the field is awash with frequencies that are vibrating to the level of there is a deadly virus. Oh my God. And that's affecting everyone who's connected to that field, unless you have a consciousness yourself that is powerful enough and aware enough and open enough to resist that. And that's the nature of those in the COVID era, including the people with me tonight, who didn't buy it. The people that did buy it, basically the field was telling them to buy it. And if we're going to reverse that and start to create a situation where this field is empowering us and informing us of a much greater picture rather than the official narrative, then people need to wake up to the level of the game that we're talking about here. And what I'm seeing, and I've been writing about this now for a year, is that the alternative media is being hijacked on purpose, not least through Musk, to hold back this level of the game that we're talking about here. And when people grasp that, then it becomes self-perpetuating communication through the field. You know, when people they talk about the Bush telegraph or being able to communicate non-verbally, and people say about that they had this miraculous situation where they were thinking about someone, and suddenly the phone rang, and it was that someone who they haven't talked to for years, and they go, "Whoa, that's incredible!" But it's not, because when they were thinking of the someone for the first time in ages, perhaps, that someone was thinking of them because they were about to phone them. And through this field comes all this so-called paranormal possibility, where we can communicate with each other in this way through thought transfer and what have you. And this is just an example of how this field is sitting there waiting for us to transform it by our own perception of reality. And this is why I said earlier, we've got 8 billion people, and the collective power of that consciousness, if it was awakened, to its true state and also to the scale of the game, would transform this field. And suddenly you'd have lights going on all over the place without anyone going on Twitter and seeing what someone said, without anyone reading a book. The lights would go on via this field. And we're communicating like this all the time. And this is the way it needs to happen, because this is the way they're controlling us. What they're doing with this cloud, this electromagnetic cloud, is they're laying it over this field so that they control what the field contains. If this goes on, what's going to happen? This is the plan: is that they replace interaction through the field to interaction through the electromagnetic, technologically generated field. So instead of being connected to this one, we're connected to this one, and that will be the hive mind telling us what to think. In other words, we'll become isolated from expanded levels of consciousness and isolated in only the hive mind consciousness.
So do you think that now proportionally they are in danger, and that's why they put so much effort, because there is a leak? We're getting conscious, or can you see a correlation why they are going so strong on trying to kill everybody now and getting them in the in their hands?
Yeah, well, I've been saying for so long that what we're seeing is not so much an attack on humanity as a defensive move. Because, for a long, long time, human consciousness was seriously asleep. When you look back through the ages, there'll come a time, if you go back far enough, I'm sure, when it was a very different world and there was a lot of awakeness. But in the period that we call known human history, the human mind has basically been asleep. It's been put to sleep, not least by religion and now the modern world. But what has been happening, and we've seen it kind of in stages. We saw it when people started to reject, for instance, rule by genetic inheritance called royalty, and they moved into politics. And so you go into politics. So what they try to do is control the political system, but at least there's a wider perspective of, hey, we're not being ruled by just a monarch anymore. We want some say in our lives. So you can see this gathering maturity, if you like, a more and more awareness. And when I started out on the journey I'm still on 34 years ago in 1990. Virtually no one wanted to know about this information. They weren't interested. I couldn't fill a phone booth with interest. But when I look at it now, it's fantastic. The number of people who are looking at the world completely differently, some amazingly differently, by grasping the sort of stuff we're talking about here. And so there is this awakening. And the more people awaken, it's a process and a sequence of more and more expanded awareness. Then these entities and this cult starts to lose control of us, because people are starting to use their own mind again and work it out. So what they're doing is seeking to mitigate, stop that awakening by connecting us to artificial intelligence. So how do you awaken when artificial intelligence through the hive mind is feeding you a perception of self-reality that doesn't ever include the word awakening? You wouldn't even think of awakening. You wouldn't even think of challenging authority, because the hive mind would never be feeding you that perception to do so. And that's why, in this period we are experiencing now, I think you mentioned it earlier, Ricardo, this is the pivotal moment in what we perceive anyway as human history, in the sense that we either stand up and control our own minds now, or it's going to be gone. And it's a moment where we are deciding where humanity goes from here. Is it going to be a free thinking expression of individual uniqueness, or is it going to be a hive mind where everyone thinks the same? And when you look at the woke mentality, for instance, which is a manifestation of this cult that introduced it and funded it into existence, when you look at the religious belief systems, whatever they may be, you're looking at hive minds already. You're looking at groupthink, which is a form of hive mind. And what they're simply doing through AI is planning to bring that into one whole hive mind when humanity as we know it will be over. But it doesn't have to be. But we've got to get streetwise pretty damn fast if we're going to head that off.
I'd like to ask you something. How many probabilities are there that if human beings were to fail in this counterattack against them ending our own free will, because otherwise we might wake up, as you say, how many possibilities are there that the response of these dominators may be mass extinction of the whole species?
Well, anything's possible because, you know, it's been clear to me for a very long time that these entities are completely insane. You know, what I found very compelling is what I'm doing all the time over the decades is looking for patterns, not patterns of disagreement, but patterns of agreement. And what you find, whether you look at religions or whether you look at ancient societies, native societies, is a very compelling theme. And that is of a non-human force manipulating human society. So Christianity has its Satan and its devil and its demons. Islam has its shaitan and Iblis and the jinn. The Gnostic belief system has the Yaldabaoth, their version of Satan, which is the consciousness, I would suggest, and entities they call archons, which is Greek for rulers. And you find the same theme everywhere you go. But interestingly, when you, again, look at the way that these entities and this consciousness, Satan, whatever the name you give it, when you see how it's described, it's invariably described in terms of being stupid and foolish and blind, because any consciousness that seeks to impose its will on others and make others suffer is an idiot. And so we're not dealing with some all-powerful consciousness with these entities that are manipulating human society. We're dealing with something that's basically moronic. And the only way that it has prevailed thus far is by keeping humanity in a greater ignorance than it's in. Because it's ridiculous, it's stupid. But what it understands, and this is its power center, it understands how to manipulate human perception. So if you look at this, you look at the world we live in, actually there's two worlds, and it's based on what I've just said. One world is the global cult. This is a global network of secret societies. And what it's doing in its compartmentalized structure at the real inner core is passing over knowledge about the plan for humanity, about the fact that actually they're representing these entities. That's why so many rich and famous people in the world who are serving the cult are Satanists, because they're why do they do satanic ritual? They're interacting with these quote gods. That's who the ancients were interacting with their human sacrifice ceremonies. And still the Satanists today are doing human sacrifice for the very reason you mentioned, Ricardo, which is this release of energy which they feed off. When the ancients were saying we're doing human sacrifice offerings to the gods, your question is, Well, what do the gods get out of it then? But this is what they get, this energy, which is not least generated through the terror of the victim. So you have this secret society network, which is passing on not just knowledge of the plan and knowledge of that, but knowledge of reality and how it works. And if you understand how reality really works and how this whole physicality is illusory, then you have the ability to manipulate people on a level that the general population does not have, because it doesn't understand what reality is. And the same networks, the cult networks, have created the other world, which is what we live in. They have created the so-called education system. The Rockefellers massively did that in America through J.D. Rockefeller and others. They control the media. They control much of the alternative media, actually, increasingly. And what they're doing is, A, passing on advanced knowledge through the cult structure, and B, using their institutions to keep the population in the dark of what they know. And so there is this built-in advantage for the idiot entities and their structure, in which the population they're targeting and trawling energy off are in a much lower level of knowledge than they're in. Not because they have to be, but because it's systematic. And what people like me and people like you are doing is taking that awareness from this cult through research and passing it on to the population so they become alert to what the game is. The challenge in that, and my God, I know that one, is that the programmed perception of the population, because of this structure, is such that when you tell them what they know, they go, "You're mad. That's not possible. That's ridiculous. I can't believe that." But you have to keep going. And I think I've shown that if you do keep going, and you won't kind of walk away from it, then you do start to make inroads. And now, vastly more than at any time in my life, humanity is starting to get more and more of what they know. Unfortunately, like I say, the alternative media hijack, which is real, is to stop it going any further. And it has to get in this arena we're talking about here for people to really start to get it. And more than anything, people need to start to grasp their true power and their true nature, which is consciousness, ultimately an expression of all consciousness.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Ike. We wouldn't want to keep you too much longer. We hope to be able to meet up with you again. And if in our research we find any new things, or if you need us for anything for your work, please do get in touch with us, with Ricardo, with myself, or with La Quinta Columna, and with our friend Astrid as well, who also collaborates with us. For anything you need, we're at your entire disposal, and we will count on you to let this message reach out to everybody. You mentioned something that's never mentioned, and that has to do with the morphogenetic fields, that field where information circulates with that intuitive knowledge. Nobody knows where it comes from, and that is floating in the air, and that quite possibly will ensure that this awareness will reach people that humans are in danger and that we have to defend ourselves. And if it is not done so in this manner, it will be very difficult for us to fight in this war where weapons and information circulates in a very dense form with their telephony masts. And in this subtle manner, probably we may have some chance. Hopefully destiny or God or whoever will help us to fight in this war where we have everything at risk. Thank you very much, Mr. Ike.
Thank you. The point I would make is, we've been chatting tonight, and I'm getting the Spanish. We've been chatting tonight, and people will watch this, and there'll be voice-to-ear communication as a result of watching it. But the vibration of what we've said tonight has gone into the field, so that it's not just the people who hear this, it's what it does to the field. This information now is in frequency terms circulating. I mean, people talk about frequency. I mean, what is my voice except frequency? It's a frequency. My vocal cords are vibrating a frequency which the brain decodes into what we perceive as human language. But it's a frequency that's passing between us. And this frequency is going into the field. So the more people that talk about this, that circulate this, the more the field is impacted upon. This is the level that they cannot stop. They cannot censor that. The way they're seeking to censor it is by overlaying that field with the electromagnetic cloud. That's what they're seeking to do. That's why they're doing it, to override the interaction with the field. That means we can communicate with each other that way. They want the cloud to overlay that, so that we don't get access to that field in the same way. It's deep stuff, and what I would say is that your work, Ricardo, and everyone at the fifth column using the English translation is absolutely fantastic, and it's confirming from a scientific point of view the nature of the challenge we face.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Ike. For us, it's been a true pleasure that you have given us part of your time to be with us, and probably that symphony, that harmony that we've been talking about is a quality of frequency that has meant that all those of us have come together that are on that same frequency wave.
100%.
Would you like to add anything?
Yeah, and I would like to thank you too. And I'm very glad that we finished on the term frequency, because in medicine, which is my field, basically, we talk now of frequency medicine, and it's the only thing that will actually be low cost. And I'm going to test a machine not in a week on frequency medicine that is healing, just because it is rebalancing the body cells and the DNA, the junk DNA and the hidden DNA that is the magic DNA that we have. But so we are in this world moving, and I'm glad that you mentioned that. I also want to mention that there are many tricks that they have made that I discovered with French radiesthesis specialists. Is that first they took bells out of all the churches, because bells is frequency when they bing bong, and they have been, I don't know, but you probably reported that in your history books. They took them out. The other thing they did, and I think that's very interesting to measure with Bovis scales, is that all the QR codes and all the code bars is diminishing the energy of anything that is in that box, the food, anything. So the French radiesthesists are doing 8 times alpha on it, and they remeasure, and the energy goes back to 100. But can you imagine that why we have the QR codes and the code bars everywhere is not just for AI? It's also because it takes down our energy. So we maybe need to have a toolbox of people, and I'm trying to tell people, do something with your code bars, take them off, to do a sign on them, and so we need a toolbox so people can, advance at their level everywhere they go. But
This is a very interesting point. If people could only see the frequency level beyond visible light of everything in this reality, they would be Well, yes, shocked, but B, they would grasp what's going on. Because we see, for instance, a pill or a vial, and we see it as something chemical or something tangible, quote, physical. But actually, it's a vibrational state. And if you introduce a vibrational disharmony into a vibrational field, you're going to disharmonize that field, and it's going to have expressions in various ways we'd rather not happen. And what you're describing there is exactly that, where just a bar, the bars you see on the what do you call them, the bars with the phones and stuff, is impacting massively on the field that we are living within. And this is the knowledge in this cult, the inner circles of it, that is kept from the people. And that's one of the ways that they manipulate us without people having any idea that that's the case.
Thank you. And thank you for inviting me. It's a great discussion. Love it.
Well, thank you very much to you, Astrid, and also to José Luis and Mr. Ike. I'd like to repeat to you, just as José Luis said, that we are entirely at your disposal. If you want to communicate anything, count on La Quinta Columna, the fifth column, for whatever you may need. And likewise, if we think that we've got something to contribute to you, we'll get in touch with you.
Fantastic. This is the thing. This is the thing. You're coming from one scientific side. I'm coming from kind of the same, but from another angle. And we both meet at the center. That is amazing confirmation. And I absolutely will want to work with you.
That's great. Thank you ever so much to all of you. And we'll adjourn this session.
Thank you.
See you next time.